Okay.
Thank you. All right. Well, good afternoon. Buenas tardes, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon. We are very excited to be presenting the second of a three-part series of events here at Prescott College, Tucson. Today, we're focusing on really centering Indigenous voices and disrupting settler colonial narratives. But I'll talk a little bit more in just a minute. But my name is Anita Fernández. I use ella, she, her pronouns. The executive director here at the Tucson Center, as well as the chief diversity officer at the college, and really honored to be moderating this talk today with you all. I'm zooming here from Tucson, which is on the unceded lands of the Tohono people and the Hohokam people, and just really honored and thrilled to have two presenters with us today, Amy Juan and Chucho Ruiz, to share their work and their perspectives with us and how they are contributing in our area here in the southern part of Arizona and beyond. And so I just wanted to say briefly before introducing Amy that in thinking about all of these talks and these presentations and the work that we're doing currently at Prescott College, we're really trying to name and see and problematize even how we're in this moment of reconciliation in a lot of ways. We are in the midst of seeing a land back movement, not only here, but across the globe. That comes with it comes the resistance, the pushback that we're definitely feeling here, particularly in education, when education is, under attack in a lot of ways. There's a whitewashing of history, and there's actually legislation trying to prevent Indigenous narratives, as well as concepts like settler colonialism and accurate histories from being taught in our schools. We were talking this morning with one of our Indigenous partners in Maasai land, and he shared that this is an era of liberation for Indigenous people globally, and that part of that process of that liberation is centering Indigenous histories and perspectives, which is what we're hoping to do today, just as one small step, but critically important. And so it's my honor to have Amy and Chucho here. I'm going to start by introducing Amy. Amy Juan is the founding member of the Tohono Ramajikan, I hope I'm saying it right, Rights Network, a grassroots collective advocating for O'odham rights and freedom of movement across borders, which includes research and advocacy on local to international platforms to document the effects of border policies on the environment and wellness of O'odham. Amy currently works for the International Indian Treaty Council Tucson office as the Arizona and Tribal Community Liaison in the defense and the recognition of Indigenous peoples all over the world, and is a 2021 Indian Collective Changemaker Fellow. So welcome, Amy. We are so grateful and honored to have you.
Good gosh, everyone. Good afternoon, good day. It's really an honor to be here today to have an important discussion and to share my work. But also I'm really happy to share space with Chucho, my brother, and just excited to have this conversation. Thank you for having me. I do hope that everyone can hear me. I'm going to speak as loud and clear as I can. I do apologize. I'm on the road heading to San Francisco, to the original homelands of the Ohlone and other tribes to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day on Alcatraz Island. And this is something that happens every year and is part of my work with the International Indian Treaty Council. So this is it. This is what our work looks like sometimes. So just really appreciate everyone who is taking time out of their day to be here to support this conversation. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land that we're tuning in from. We are tuning in from traditional O'odham lands, which span north to Scottsdale, Phoenix area, south to Hermosillo, Mexico, west to the ocean, which the direction that I'm headed to, the Sea of Cortez, but also east to the San Pedro River, east of Tucson. So those are traditional O'odham lands before these borders were established and before these state lines, the county lines were established. But also we share the land with our neighbors, the Yoemem, the Yaqui people, Yaqui Nation, which I'm also very appreciative of all the different ways that we're continuing to share and work together in our lands there, especially around Chucho. Chucho is the original name or the O'odham name for Tucson. It means the black base. Specifically in Chucho in Tucson, we like to recognize Chucho, which is now people recognize it as a mountain, but traditionally served as a stronghold for O'odham when we were fighting with our enemies, who are now our friends, the Apaches. But a lot of history that is there in the place. The mountains all have names, especially Babatuak, Toa, Gusuwatuak, all of the mountains that surround us. And I think that's important for recognizing, where we're at. One of my good friends who I'm on the road with, Mikey Enos, he's always reminding us that if we don't know the names of our mountains and all of them, or their names, as well as the plants and the different things that we're taught, then we need to work a little bit harder to represent who we are as O'odham. So to leave it at that, I'll go into my presentation. And again, thank you for being here with us today. So Sapo. You can go ahead and start the slide, if that's okay. Okay. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about food, but I would like to acknowledge that a lot of times we do say that himduk, the gokuduk, our culture is our strength, and in O'odham, himduk means the way of life or the way to walk, and it encompasses all those different things: our food, our languages, our songs, our dances, our mountains, the way that we treat each other. And throughout my work and my travels, I found this to be the constant truth and be a source of strength. So this is what I'm going to focus on today. You can go to the next slide. So I think it's important, especially, when we were talking about, or when I saw the flyer and just the title or the theme of our talk today, it really made me think, well, yes, how are we deconstructing or decolonizing this settler construct that we have come to live in and to know and to exist in? But how are we still at them? How do we maintain our truth and our values and just the integrity of who we are? And so part of that is acknowledging where we come from. Settler colonialism is very individualistic, but in our ways, in Indigenous people's ways, we always want to recognize who we come from, because those are the teachings that are passed on. It's not through academia, it's not through a university, it's through our family. So to introduce myself again, Anya Jigik Imi Juan, Jakumaya Amajut, Chukang Chukshan, O'odham Nation, and your judge and your og, Jigik Ramoda McGill, Sylvester Juan, and your gop and your waska, Jigik Mary Melissa Miles, but Daniel Juan, but and your Hooch and your Bob of Jigik Mary Elizabeth McGill, but Lawrence McGill, but and your weapon God Elijah Kristen Ross, and your Wilma Gum on your Wilma Gum. So just introducing my family, my parents and my grandparents, and these are pictures of my parents and great grandparents. My dad's family comes from a community called Wichita, which is also known as Newfields, and it's one of the communities right along the what is now the U.S.-Mexican border to the east, so a little bit closer to Sassavie. And then my mom's family also comes from across the line, what is now Mexico, from a community called Jodaguaya or Greenwells, and from different communities along there, like Little Tucson. And so these are my people. This is who I come from. Just to give a little background so you can get to know me better. So that's them. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to focus on today is two main things. One is my work around the border rights. It's always just funny for me to say because, you know, it's awesome. We don't acknowledge the border. Yes, it's there. Yes, it's caused many issues and problems, but at the same time, it's funny to say it because it's all awesome land. But that's where my roots come from, and that's where a lot of my work has sprung from. So I'll be focusing on that as well as our food work, food sovereignty, state sovereignty. So to get into the story of how I began in this work, I think it's important to share that because I'm not an academic. I have an associate's degree, but with that associate's degree, I've gotten to a lot of interesting places. But it is because of my experience and the work in the community. So this is where it all started from. If you know a little bit about Autumn border issues, there are traditional crossings that Autumn have traditionally crossed back and forth since the border was established. But now those crossings are closed, and it makes it even more difficult for Autumn to go back and forth, for Autumn in Mexico to come to the US and vice versa. There's always a lot of stories about the dangers of the border, the different things that are happening. But for me, what I remember is a scene like this. It's always been a scene, a gathering place. It was a place that we went to with our grandpa when he was done with his ranching work to get a treat. And sometimes those treats were a quesadilla or a soda that you see the man sitting on. But these are the stories that I grew up with and what I got a glimpse of growing up of the border, especially this place in this picture. This is the San Miguel Gate. And it was one of the most popular trading areas for families to come together and to trade food, tobacco, coffee, tequila, and cheese, and what have you. And that man there on the horse is one of my grandfathers. And so these are the memories that we come from, and that's why it hurts so much to see the changes of militarization that's happened in our community is definitely not the same. But this is what it used to be. Next slide. Yeah, the next slide, please. I currently work with the International Indian Treaty Council. As when I first started there, I worked as the Tucson office manager and now work as the Arizona and Tribal Community Liaison. IATC has been around since 1974, but for the past 3 years, we have established our headquarters in South Tucson. And I'm very happy to be working with an Indigenous organization and the community work that I have done, which I'll share a little bit about, has gotten me here. The picture on top was in the summer, fall of 2017, excuse me, 2018, when I was invited to sit on a panel at the United Nations in New York on World Indigenous Peoples Day. And it was there that I shared a statement on the impacts of militarization on Autumn lands, where the theme was migration and the protection of people's rights to cross borders. And so that was pretty exciting. It was There's a whole experience, but these are some of the places that I've been able to be. That the picture down below was taken at our office in Tucson with our director Andrea and my coworker Chris, and that's that's our daily thing, is working for the people. So I'm very happy to do this work. Next slide, please. So most recently, with the erection of the barrier, the border wall, there's so many different platforms, so many different areas that we were needed in. One of the most important things that I saw when I first started getting into being conscious about what was happening to our community was just to maintain the connection for all of them on both sides of the line, especially when we're talking about ceremony and we're talking about culture. And so along with friends and community members, one who I see is on here, Rowena, we started to talk about, what are we going to do? What can we do when the border wall was being constructed and to the west of us and to the east of us. But at that time, it was urgent for us to be out at or Quito Springs, where we organized and planned a weekend ceremony for autumn on both sides of the line. And the picture on the left is of community members on both sides. Some were able to cross and some weren't. But there at Arahuaipia, there's a spring that has existed for hundreds and thousands of years. And so we did a ceremony there, and we felt that it was really important for us to do things like this, even just as simple as being able to hold hands. Because if you live on the border, or if you have been on the border, you'll see now that you're not able to do that. And so the picture on the right is in the same area that the picture on the left was taken. And you can see that we're not able to embrace, we're not able to take our water to each other through those bars. And you can see how much the land has changed. A lot of devastation. And of course, it's heartbreaking to go out there and to remember what the ceremony that we did, and then to see that how much has changed. But that doesn't stop us from doing what we want to do and we need to do. We always find our way around it. So that's some of our experience this past year and a half, dealing with what's been happening in our areas, in our traditional homelands. Next slide, please. This is another picture that we took, and these are like a very few handful of pictures that we took because we didn't want to take pictures actually because it was a ceremony, but these pictures were taken after everything was done. And I'm really glad that we decided to do that because again, this picture, it always makes me feel like at that time, at least we were a stitch, we were a glitch in that wound of the border when the land was being cleared. Again, it looks different, completely different on both sides. But I feel like it was very healing, and again, still a historic picture for us to take. Next slide, please. So there's a lot to share, but we only got 20 minutes. So I'm gonna go through this, and I want you all to keep in mind that what I'm sharing is, it's that constant going back and forth between our community, our elders, what we're taught, our values, and then also how do we sync that in with the movement work, or what people call activism. How do we sew those things together to create this blanket of work that we do, because some people feel like these things are hard to work together sometimes, and they are. Sometimes there's disagreements between the way we do that, but I think that is beautiful because what I've seen is that it definitely does that, exactly what we're talking about, is disrupting the settler narrative of how things should be, or how we should do things, but we tell them no. And the other thing is we don't ask for permission. We do what we need to do according to what our responsibilities are and who we are accountable to, which is our own communities and our elders, for these things that we're taught. We weren't taught these things for no reason. So sometimes it can get us in trouble when we're doing those things, but in the end, you know, we feel good for doing that healing work. And so me going into the food right now is part of that healing work, because you know, if you're out on the border or you're battling border patrol, it can take a toll, especially on your mind and your heart. So part of that healing work for me is the food work. You know, how it was in the past and how it is now. And so I'm just going to share some pictures of the work that has been happening for the past 10 years, which is along with the border work as well. So we have some pictures of an older farmer, and this is Nolan Johnson, who's one of the younger farmers in our community today, out at a traditional flood farm in Calic, Arizona, out in the nation. Next slide, please. And as always, acknowledging our elders, Mr. Danny Lopez, who is no longer with us, but was a great teacher to many. On the right is Clifford Pablo, who is one of the oldest elder farmers on the nation, who is still active working for Donaldson Community College in the Agricultural Extension Program. And because of them teaching us, we're a continuation of their work and their wishes. And so part of that is growing farmers. Can you go to the next slide, please? So for the Autumn community, so this is wild harvesting, but just to add a little bit to that last slide is that part of the knowledge that these elders shared in I would say when I first started really getting involved, 2010, was coming to us young people and saying, hey, there's no young farmers in our community anymore. And hey, did you know that in the 1920s, often we were growing about 1 million pounds of tepary beans. And by the early 2000s, we were only growing about 100 pounds of tepary beans. So that makes me think about how self-sufficient we were, how healthy we were to be growing, harvesting, and eating our own foods, and how that has affected our people in the long run as far as our health. The picture here on the left is of one of my grandmothers. Her name was Anita Hill, who is pretty prominent in the history of the Southwest or the deserts, Northern Desert, especially when it comes to her knowledge and her experience of harvesting baidach or saguaro fruit. And that's me picking ipai. Ipai is one of my favorite foods out there. And acts as simple as this are, again, another disruption, because we are being active in our own health, being out there in the land, getting to know the land, be intimate with the land, and being self-sufficient and not relying on you know, constant source of food that sometimes or most times isn't so good for us. So there we go. Next slide, please. These are some of the young people that I've worked with throughout the years, Kristen and Paige, and you know, these are young people who maybe didn't eat traditional foods before working together with us, who had never grown or harvested. And you can just see in a lot of the pictures that I share that everybody's happy. And I think that's important too. A lot of times where we think that the struggle is what's sexy, you know, for us to be stressed out, to work ourselves as much as we can. But how do we, where are we talking about happiness? Where are we talking about wellness? And how that's also a part of disrupting this narrative, you know, that we should be suffering or that we are only in certain spaces of a workforce or a movement, but how are we taking care of ourselves is a big part of moving forward and what we imagine for the future for future generations and being happy in this work. So next slide, please. Again, community members, smiling, eating healthy food, being grown by our young people who again are getting experience not only on the land, but actually working together and relying on each other or to get this work done. And that's another lesson that I'm constantly learning. And is what I appreciate in the different forms and the different communities. That's why I give a lot of love to Chucho, because in that community in Tucson or Tucson, or when we're talking about the health of men and women and relationships, that's a circle that's also very important, and another way that we've learned to rely on each other to create a healthy community. Next slide, please. These are some of the things that we have, how would I say, reclaimed as well. Not only growing food, but hunting food with our young people. We start with rabbits, teaching them how to skin them, how to process them and cook them, as well as storing food. I know there's a lot of canning that people are doing. A lot of people are growing their own food now, but a part of that is also, storing it for a long time. And there's mistakes that I've made learning how to do it. My squash has gotten moldy, or the ants or the birds got to it. So I've learned a few tricks along the way, and learning how to feed ourselves and feed the community. Next slide, please. One of my favorite jobs was as a culture teacher at Babakiri High School, which is one of the 3 high schools on the res. It's actually where I graduated from in 2004. But going there as a young culture teacher was a big learning lesson and surprise, because I didn't expect to be a culture teacher this young. But I felt like that it was urgent to continue to pass on what I know, what my friends know, my family knows, my community knows, because it's urgent. We're losing a lot of elders, but also it's really a cool way to connect with young people. So you can see 2 sides of things. You have the girls, they're learning how to make chuchimit or tortillas. And then we have our young men on the right side, who a lot of times were labeled as troublemakers or gang members or what have you, but I was able to get them out there in the sun and in the dirt and have them harvest cholla buds and have them be happy about it and be proud of it. And you can see that in the picture. And it's just another example of how powerful our culture is. It can change lives when you feel included, when you feel that you're a part of a community, and the give and take of that. So I like to share these pictures. Next slide, please. Again, smiles. These are my classes. We grew a lot of food, and harvesting was a lot of fun. And of course, just they're proud to see that, hey, I can actually do this. And I hope that, and it is something that they're going to carry with them, just like a degree. You can't forget how to ride a bike, or maybe you do, but it comes back to you. And so this skill of learning how to grow food, how to work together, I'm hoping that it's something that stays with these young people constantly. I see that it does. They're still I'm still connected with a lot of them in the community, and I'm on them and remind them, like, hey, you were taught this, don't forget it, or don't let it go. Next slide, please. These are some friends that I count on. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of people that we count on in community to do and accomplish certain things. To the right is my good friend Michael Enos, and to the left is my friend Goff, who is from Hill River. This was a day that we were outside cooking with the students traditional meals, and these aren't things that are taught in schools anymore. A lot of schools don't have home ec. Some schools have culinary classes, but to actually get kids doing, all of this in a school setting that didn't have that before, and actually taking them out of the classroom, because to be honest, from the 80s up until more recently, a lot of things were in books. A lot of young people weren't too interested in learning the culture, and it was because I think it was something that, again, like, they didn't see how they could carry it into the future. So I think we saw that as our job was, how do we make him look cool? How do we get kids out there and be proud to get dirty and be proud to be working outside and getting a tan from the sun and making it fun. And we just had to be that example. So a lot of my work is that, it's not just in the office doing, writing grants, which I do a lot of now, but also that community work, which is, of course, a big part of what makes me who I am, but also continues to feed my spirit and also continues to feed my skills that I can pass on, not just to people in my own community, but to the greater community and anybody who's watching this. I hope that it
I think we might have lost Amy there for a minute. She may have lost her connection. We'll see if she rejoins quickly. Oscar, can you see if she's there? Okay, I'm guessing she lost her signal because she's on the road. So I think what we maybe will do is, Chucho, if you're okay with it, we'll transition into hearing from you and or at least getting you introduced, unless Amy pops back in. Okay, does that work for you? So I just really want to, even though Amy's not here to hear, I just really want to thank her for sharing all of that knowledge and those images, So here she is back. Awesome.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we just lost you for a minute.
Okay, I apologize. I'm
No.
finishing here. So what this has turned into and how it has transitioned or evolved into the work that I do today is taking all of that experience, all of those stories, and taking them to bigger platforms like the UN, where they are paying attention to what Indigenous peoples are building. And that means, especially around the work of food, especially around how we are trying to protect land, and how, when I say the language, there's a big thing right now that the UN is trying to coin, which is the rights to nature. But the way that we see it is that, especially in our stories with a lot of Indigenous peoples, is that it's our responsibility to protect Mother Earth and the land, and we work together. But some of these laws and these policies are working to divide people from the land and to say, this is a protected area, you can't be here. But what we're saying is we are protecting the land, we have to be here. And so taking that language into these platforms begins with community talks like this. So in this picture, this is a gathering that we had in my community just 2 years ago. And I feel very how would I say? It's kind of surreal sometimes how things turn out. Because in this picture, we were talking about climate change. We were talking about the need to bring our seeds back without knowing that the pandemic was coming. And so I felt that it was very, it was in good time that we were having these conversations. Next slide, please. So what that turned into, a lot of you may probably know Native Seed Search, and I'm being as respectful as I can. But Native Seed Search is a longtime organization that is not an Indigenous organization, but does work with Indigenous communities. But they have a collection of seeds, and a part of their collection is over 100 varieties of pot-based seeds. And so it was really kind of a blessing, like I said, when we were having conversations pre-pandemic about we need to bring our seeds back, we need to grow more food, and we need to be more self-sufficient. And that in some way the ancestors heard us and said, okay, you're ready. So this past year we were able to bring home a good collection of seeds from Native Seed Search, and this is just a small portion of those, but along with community members and friends, we brought them home. We had a blessing for them, and we distributed them to the communities that they came from, to the farmers that we grew, to grow these foods again where they came from, because you know, they've been sitting in a freezer, which to some people might be their way of protecting them, but they're still alive. How do we keep something alive? We continue to grow them. We continue to give them life. And so I'm very happy that everything turned out that way, where all of our new farmers were able to get seeds when the first rains came. And if you're from Tucson or Tucson or the Southwest area, you'll know that we had a really good rain season this year. We had a really good monsoon. And so that means that we have some very healthy seed that came back to us from this collection. And I'm very proud of that work. And it was a mix of community, kind of underground, organizational work. But these are things that happen, you know, and I feel like, yes, it is work, but also it's sometimes it's divine. Sometimes we're given these responsibilities and then we carry them out. Sometimes they're not things that we ask for, but if they come to us, along with the help of our friends, family, and community, we get it done. And so this is why it's very passionate. I'm very passionate to do this work, and it's done in a way that a lot of times people ask, well, how do you do that? I can't really say how other than saying this is what we were taught, and these are the responsibilities that we're given. And there's a lot of elders and community members that we count on to help guide us along the way in this work. And I won't lie and say that some people weren't angry that we got our seats back, but it was because of that. We were disrupting their control over our seats. And you know, but we didn't let that stop us, and we needed them to see that, yes, we do still have this knowledge, even if these elders that these seeds came from are gone, we're their descendants, and we're going to continue to take care of them. So next slide, please. And I'm going to end here with two pictures of our new farmers, our young people here. And again, connecting the community work with the work that I do with the International Indian Treaty Council, just quoting Article 31, which says that Indigenous peoples have the right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and traditional cultural expressions, as well as manifestations of their sciences, technologies, and cultures, including human and genetic resources, seeds, and medicines. And that's in one of our gardens and cells out on the Thanath Nation. Next slide. This is the last slide. And these are our new farmers. These are young farmers who are between the ages of, you know, their late teens to mid 30s, who about 10 years ago weren't in this line of work, but now we have a new generation of young people who are strong in our culture, who are strong in the community, but who are also strong in these other worlds, in academia, in different organizations and movements. And as a community person, as a young woman who has responsibilities to my people, I'm very proud and knowing that it didn't happen in an organizational way. It happened in a very organic way, in a way that we were taught, and that feels good, and that'll be long lasting. So I hope that everyone enjoyed this, and if you have questions, we'll wait for that. And thank you very much for your time and for listening. And I hope that you learned something good, something that made you smile or inspire you. And I'll look forward to your questions. Thank you. Pass it on to my brother Chucho. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, Amy. Such a beautiful presentation and such a testament to everything that you're doing, you know, right here on the ground locally, and then this the incredible international impact that you're having too. So I think we're going to have questions at the end. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. And so our next speaker is Chucho Ruiz Sevoi. And Chucho has transformed the lives of countless youth through a La Cultura Cura approach through grassroots organizing and youth engagement. And later as an employee of Chicanos por la Causa, where he serves as the coordinator for the Nawiolin Wellness Program. Chucho has worked to create Indigenous solidarity by building intertribal relationships with Indigenous communities across Turtle Island. Chucho has served as a central facilitator of La Tradición through his affirmation and maintenance of Nahuatl cultural practices and ways of life, and a commitment to social justice and obligation to the Tucson community with the Calpuli Teoxicali. I know he's going to talk about much more of his work that he's doing here. And so I want to welcome you, Chucho. It's really an honor to have you here and to share this space. And so if you want to just go ahead and take it over, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Anita. And as I'm pulling this up, let's see where it's at. Why do I have so many open? You know what? I'm not sure if it's, hold on just a second. Okay, and let me see. Okay, I got it now. Well, I just want to say thank you. Just appreciate you all, especially my sister Amy Juan. You know, I'm always really humbled and honored to be in community with Amy and just to know of all the amazing things that Amy is doing and just the amazing person that she is. And so yeah, I'm like, I feel like I'm constantly learning from her. So thank you so much, Amy, and safe travels too, and be safe, and then say my hellos to Mikey as well. And so, man, I bet you that sounds like a really fun road trip right there. So, but yeah, so I just kind of, I wanted to share. Can you all see my screen now? Okay, cool. And I do apologize if this presentation, we're kind of joking about it, if it's distorted in any way. It was kind of like a last minute piece together of other ones. But I'll start off by introducing myself as well. Mishpancinco Noañolque, Mishpancinco Noañolque, Totlasotlanantzin, Toltepetlamanalco, Iwan Noshtin Autumn, Juet, Iwan Noshtin Noampo Autumn, Iwan Yuem Wiam, Totlasotlanantzin, Tlaticpac, Tlamanalco, Iwan Noshtin Tlamanalca, Ejecanao Campa, en Tlahuiztlampan, Cihuatlampan, Mictlampa, Huiztlampan, Huicayolo, en Tlayolo, Mishpancinco, Nonantzin Leonor, Notatzin Ventino, Notoca Chucho, Nichane by Sevoi, Wanoshni Cocone, Marisela Tutuli, Gigi Sevoi, Locaheme, Wantetaviecti, Notesiwa María, en Debe Yoeme, Tlamanalca, Tlaticpac, Zawaripa, Sonora, México, Wanoshtin, Ecanao Campa, Wanoshtin, Teteotlaxihualisli. So just wanted to introduce myself in the best way possible and the best way that I know how, that acknowledges life, creation, ancestors, my family, my lineage, my community, my children, uh, and my partner, my wife Maria, and then the territories that I find myself on here in Chucho, Tlamanalco, and on Autumn territory, and then with the UM relatives, as was mentioned before. And so I wanted to start off by saying that I'm here to speak today on behalf of the Tlamanalca peoples, uh, and that are reside here in Tucson, on behalf of my community. And by no means do I speak on behalf of all indigenous peoples. We're very diverse peoples with different backgrounds. We share a lot of similar experiences in terms of our cosmovision, but then also as a result of colonialism, so in challenging that as well. But yeah, so just inviting folks always, to be intentional of recognizing where we're at, and the fact that we're on occupied lands and where it is that you find yourselves, and then even just disrupting that, right, as Amy's traveling out to those territories, to Ohlone territories, right, and often we're just, well, where is that, right, and we want to hear that Christian English or Spanish name, right, and so yeah, so just being able to do that in an intentional way. And I wanted to, I put this image on here because as I'm saying that we're like a diverse peoples, there's also like all this history of exchange, of cultural exchange and trade routes, right? When we think about folks traveling down up and down the coast, and then like our spiritual runners, and making those connections, and some connections that we've had since time immemorial, and then some of them, redeveloping those relationships amongst each other as Native peoples, and on an international level, because as we know, we didn't cross the borders crossed us. We didn't come to America came to us. And and I just really, really appreciate the work that Amy has done, alongside that border, right, that barrier that unfortunately is more than just a physical barrier, but we know that it runs deep, um, for us on a spiritual level, on a psychological level, and what it means for us. And so I was just thinking about the idea of settler colonialism, and the idea of this deep rooted belief of us being discovered, and that's something that is you know um, in talks today, right, when we fall around this fall season, when we fall around October, and Cristobal Colon is being acknowledged and recognized in different communities on and across throughout this nation. And for us, just all the work and all the labor, intellectual and emotional, spiritual labor that we go into to engage in this combat, right? To challenge, right, those narratives, to disrupt those colonial narratives, right? Of what's happening, of what we're going into, right? Whether it's thanks taking, truth telling, all these things, and just recognizing truth and reconciliation day on September 30th, and how all these things are kind of like coming up during this time. Um, and a lot of this we understand it as it's not necessarily our history and our legacy. It's a legacy of white supremacy. So we start talking about colonization, but it's not something um, that starts from us, right? And this is something that again was like superimposed on us from from not that very long ago. Not that very long ago. The language that I'm speaking También si estoy hablando en español, these are like foreign languages, son lenguas extranjeras, they're foreign, and they're necessary for us and for our survival today, but they're very new, you know, to these regions, especially over here on the Southwest where we're at, right? They haven't been around very long, you know, so for us to continue to invoke and evoke our ancestral teachings is important. And this is an ongoing process, right? Genocide is physical, psychological, and it's on paper, right? Each nation state, each colonizer nation state has a set of criteria of who is native and who is not, right? Or we get to say who is and who isn't, right? And we get to say who's sovereign and who's not, right? And we know that, you know, colonizer states, nation states, they go hard and from all aspects of the ways that we're socialized, right? Through media, through the different institutions. But we know that this is constantly coming up for us is our erasure, right? Not just being marginalized, but being invisibilized, right? So these are just some of those examples. And you know, and I prefer to lean into a lot of like my sister was talking about, you know, our culture, you know, and our practices that we're so fortunate to have because we weren't supposed to be here. We weren't supposed to be holding on, you know, we weren't supposed to have our songs, our languages, our dances, our seeds, and yet here we are, you know, and so I know that in our culture we find our sense of peace and our sense of fulfillment. It's our medicine, you know, what continues to protect us, you know, and navigate in all areas, you know, not just in the rural areas where, you know, they intentionally hope to keep us, you know, and we thrive wherever it is that we're at, you know, but within the inner cities too, you know, what today they call barrios or the hood, you know, knowing that this, you know, regardless of the asphalt and the concrete, you know, we're going to continue to have a relationship with our earth mother. It's because of the vision that our ancestors had for us and the prayers and the hope, you know, the dreams that they had. You know, that's how we continue to move forward and disrupting this narrative that they're so desperately pushing, right, at all times, you know, and you know, so for us, it's important to continue to assert ourselves, take up space, and this idea of decolonizing, you know, it's tough. It's tough in the sense that settler colonialism is not an event, you know. Uh, Folks are still here, you know, and doesn't look like anybody's leaving anytime soon. And so it's tough. And I hearing my sister Amy talk about the land and you know on the UN level, right? Like who has access to the land? And we're still being denied that. There's still even sites that are considered sacred to us, right? That are lifelines for us. We're still being denied that, right? And so how is it that we can continue to challenge that, right? And through just our own existence. And so this is part of the community that I represent, you know, that I feel so fortunate to be a part of, you know, that we still have our practices, you know, we still have some of our teachings, and some of our ceremonial obligations that we have throughout the year, um, about how do we maintain those interpersonal relationships with one another as we're growing and developing and having to live in two worlds, right? And where as Native people, we know what it's like to be in an all-night ceremony or an all-week ceremony and then be expected to show up to work, the next day, or to school, or to a meeting, and so those types of things, right? And so I think about decolonizing, and then this idea of indigenizing, right? And how, how those are things that we're constantly having to like navigate, right? Taking up space and making it ours, reclaiming things, right? And because there's this idea of what is perceived as native or Indian, and and, and we're constantly being told, right? And who we are and the way that we should be, and there's this devalidation, right, of our authenticity as people, and we should be able to determine, and we do, for ourselves, who we are. And so I want to be mindful of the time, um, because I feel like I could talk about this work. This is the work, in my professional career that I've been really fortunate enough to do through the organization of Chicanos por la Causa. But and then before that, I do want to mention that during just pre-pandemic time, I was fortunate enough to do some work, as Amy mentioned, with men in our community, and being like really intentional in reaching out to brothers, and thinking about our responsibilities as Indigenous men, as Native men, to our communities, to the women in our communities, to Two-Spirit in our communities, and to each other, even as men, and the children. And so I'm working with a national organization called the Call to Men, and having virtual talking circles once a month has been something just really healing, right, for myself personally, and for the men that I'm fortunate enough to participate, because it's like on an intercontinental level where folks are showing up and participating, and we can't do that. When we do that work, we can't do it without centering, where we're coming from. So as part of that work, I've been fortunate enough to work with all of them relatives, the brother. I think when I met Amy, was around the same time I met the brother Anthony Francisco Jr. And so, just being able to continue to develop and just coexist, and being reminded of that interconnectedness and that interdependence, right? As nations and nations of nations, right? But yeah, so I just kind of wanted to mention that work, because it's something I feel that it's very special. It's very unique, unfortunately, but we're hoping that we're able to expand that work, because we see that there's a need for it, right? And the impact of where that we see, if that work is not there, is that the women in our communities continue to experience high levels of violence, and there's a connection between bringing an awareness, right, to missing and murdered Indigenous women, missing and murdered Indigenous girls and relatives. And so just all the work that continues to happen around that, but again, centering the work of Native men to take responsibility in that. So the Now We Lead Wellness program, this is a program that's been around for close to 30 years, and it's evolved. The name did go through like a transition. We wanted to use a name that all the names of our programming, of our youth programming, have Native terms, because we wanted to be intentional to acknowledge and recognize the language and where these teachings come from. And then that it's a wellness program, because the more and more that we were aware of how our youth of color, Indigenous youth, are being denied access, right, to an opportunity and to their full potential to experience an overall wellness. We said this is what we want to focus on, a lot of folks focus on their academic achievement, or just different aspects of their growth and their development, but we wanted to really look at it from a holistic perspective. And yeah, we're not asking you like what you're going to be when you grow up, but like how are you going to be, right? Where you have a sense of fulfillment, will you be healthy, what things continue, what things will you have in your life, that will continue to bring that health and that wellness, into your family, to your community. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just so that you are aware, this is a program that has existed for a while in our community. We work predominantly in the high schools. We just started working in the middle schools, where I believe we're at 8 different high schools this year in Tucson, por la causa, where we have 2 charter schools that we operate, and then we work with Hashan Preparatory 2, which is an all-native school, offering our curriculum and our services that kind of expand more than just in the classroom, but exposing them to leadership retreats, camps, leadership conferences. Our leadership retreat is the Corazón de Slan, and the conference is the Shinaxi conference, and then health and wellness fairs, where we're hoping, we hope to connect with families. And this here more recently, we've been doing professional development work, where we've been able to provide, just our insights in regards to culturally responsive practices, cultural humility with our partners, right? Because again, is this that holistic approach with the youth and families that we're serving. So, because what we find, unfortunately, is like a lot of the institutions that are meant to support them, sometimes, just create more harm, perpetuate more harm for them. And so we're hoping by providing some of our support and some of our insight, with what we're already sharing with the youth and the things that the youth are jiving with. But it's important to be able to do that with other agencies and partners as well. And then bringing in the community, right? I feel like our program is a real reflection of what's happening in grassroots on the ground in the community, and really exposing the youth to what's going on. Maybe they wouldn't hear about it, maybe they wouldn't know about it, and even as something as simple and profound that we're on Autumn land, right? And asking them that, right? And every site that we go to, making sure that we start with that. So I'm gonna go through here. I guess I'll give y'all a teaser, right? These are some images. When we think about disrupting settler colonialism, when we think about working with youth, like what does that mean? Like in regards to learning spaces, right? We often just think about learning spaces being in the classroom. We all know that isn't necessarily true. As the images that Amy shared with you, right? Like there's so much learning, and every topic could be hit, every school top subject could be hit, planting some seeds and harvesting, right? Or at a carne asada, right? Or at a sweat lodge, right? Or a traditional ball game in the mountains, right? So we know that there's like a lot of learning that takes place in ways that we've always had, these practices that we've always had for our community, for our youth. So I think I'm gonna stop there. I'll be mindful. I know that folks might have some questions, but I know that this could be accessible to you all too, and through through Anita and Oscar. But again, just Plazo Kamati Waniak to each and every one of you, and thank you for the opportunity to share today. I appreciate you all.
Thank you so much, Chucho. Just so many rich pieces that you are bringing up, sharing with us, and also reminding us, just the importance of starting your presentation, reminding us, that Native people, Indigenous people are not a monolith, right? And that when we approach these kinds of dialogues and these conversations in October in general in that way, that in itself is a form of erasure, right? Of all of the many differences, even though there are, like you said, all of those ties as well within Indigenous communities, not just here on Turtle Island, but across the globe, right? And so there are so many other things, but I did want to offer, we have about, I think about 10 more minutes. If folks have specific questions for Amy or Chucho, if you can go ahead and put them in the chat. You can also click on the Q&A button on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we can ask some questions of our two speakers. As we're waiting for some questions, I really wanted to also highlight both of you bringing up, you know, Chucho, you named it directly, you know, talking about the legacy of white supremacy, that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about disrupting settler colonialism. And then Amy, talking about the need for disrupting and talking very specifically about disrupting the control of the seeds, right? The seeds of the Otan people and the ancestors, and how that definitely makes some people angry, and the anger that comes with that disruption, which is a lot of that pushback and settler colonialism as a project. You know, Indigenous people are not part of that. They are part of that project, but they get in the way, right? And so we have that de-indigenizing is part of that project. And so pushing back in our educational spaces, in our food system spaces, and our food justice spaces. So I really just appreciate you both directing us in that way towards those conversations. Oscar, help me out here because I'm not sure if I see questions or not.
No questions have popped up.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up?
Anita, can I?
Please,
Anita,
yeah.
can I add to what you were saying just now?
Yes, please, Amy.
I learned a lot in this process of bringing the seeds that Carl have been helping to just strengthen our food system. I was surprised. I am and I am not systems from within our own community because we're so used to these systems, because they've been in control for this organization, because they're organized, or because they have this reputation for being seed keepers, right? But what does that mean? That just because they're keeping them safe in their freezer, you know, but actually keeping in mind the integrity of the DNA of these seeds, you know, what does that mean? How do we continue to grow that? And so what I mean by that is, when I first started having conversations with people in my community about bringing these seeds home, there was one thing that was really sensitive to me was one of my mentors asking me, okay, if we get these seeds back, so then do they belong to you, you know, or what are you gonna do with them? And it was just like very directive, and I always heard about it, but I think the confusion there was just, you know, getting caught up in the settler mindset where you know, we forgot that women are the seed keepers. Women are traditionally the seed keepers to take care of them, and that it is a process, you know, of male and female. But when we've forgotten, or if those traditions or people aren't living those practices, then they don't understand, and they think that things happen a certain way. So there was this deconstructing of within our own community of saying, hey, you know, remember, this is how things are supposed to be. And healing that, and coming to a place where we can say thank you, you know, for your work. And yes, you know, that there was some anger that we got our seeds back, but I intentionally didn't meet that with my own reaction. It was just let's just do what we're supposed to do, which is to grow these seeds, grow these foods, and let them speak for themselves. And that's, you know, more powerful than anything I could have said. I think, you know, it's not all like smiles and rainbows. There's a lot of learning lessons, especially from our own community, and it just really opened my eyes to that disruption. But you know, how do we heal from that?
Thank you so much, Amy. Yes. We have a sort of a follow-up question to that. Cheyenne is asking, can we support seed sovereignty in urban communities? For either of you.
I can share a bit. I'm gonna give my Lakota sisters in Chicago. When I first I saw the concrete jungle. Part of my colonial mindset was thinking like, you know, here I am coming from the nation, from the desert. There's so much land, and then going to the city, and you know, thinking like my sisters, like kind of feeling like, hey, they don't have you. But they taught me really how people can do that. The land before it was a city. In Chicago, the land was a swamp, you know, and just learning of how that grows. What are the native plants? What are the native foods that exist in that area? Because a lot of the urban planning, like they bring in invasive species or species that don't belong there. So how can you continue to grow what traditionally or historically has grown there, and also to utilize them? So my sisters in community with different communities, whether they're Mexican, Black, Armenian, like so many of the communities that are in Chicago, coming together to share spaces and asking, hey, can we grow our corn here? Can we grow our squash here? Can we grow our beans here? And that was so like mind opening for me to see. It's like, yeah, we're gonna go to this woman's house to harvest our corn. Yeah, to see them do that and how these different communities were working together, and also to you know, plant guerrilla style seed bombs, growing corn where people would least expect it, you know, downtown Chicago, throwing some seeds in there, but also tapping the maple trees. That's also something I thought was really cool for them to do, and that's a traditional practice for them. But going out into the city to tap the maple trees, and like, you know, even them doing that disrupted like the daily life of people who are used to just you know, the how life is in a big city like Chicago. But my advice is that, you know, get to know the land underneath the city, get to know the plants and the wildlife around there, and continue to support that, because that in itself is an ecosystem of that city or urban setting, and build that community with people, especially to involve young people, and what grows there, and growing your collection of seeds and sharing that, making sure that everybody survives, because at the heart of everything, I feel, you know, if you're a warrior, if you're doing resistance work, if you're in any kind of work, everybody has to eat, and we all have to survive to do the work that we do. And so food's like a core part of that, you know, being self-sufficient. And I just see that that's what works from Chicago to Chiapas. There's just something that works for everybody. So that's what I got.
Thank you so much, Amy. Awesome. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. I'm not sure we're going to get to all of them, but Chucho, how are the youth that you work with responding to both the process of consciousness raising and healing within the curriculum that you offer?
I feel, you know, we feel so fortunate in our program to be able to be in community with young people. I feel they carry so much knowledge, they carry a wealth of information. And I feel like they're quick to catch some of the concepts that we're introducing, and really to teach us, right, and put us on to make sure that we're actually learning from them, right? So it's reciprocal in that sense. And we do have an evaluation process that we do through our research and evaluation department through CPLC, where we use different tools to be able to measure that, right? And our R&E department makes us look amazing, right? Because we're able to continue to do this work for so long, right? But as far as we could tell, the youth are being engaged and receptive, and there's so many things that are telling them that, again, when youth are willing to go out of their way to participate in anything out of the classroom that we're hoping to connect them with in the community. And the fact that they're showing up, right? Because we know that these are the times where, like, it's a struggle and it's a challenge within itself, right? Whether it's virtual or hybrid or in person, right? And I would say it's more so the staff, that there's a lot of staff that are on board with it, but there's a lot of staff that struggle with our material, because it disrupts the settler colonial narrative, right? So yeah, so I've experienced it as being something very, like, healing, and just always learning from it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that response. We have a question in the Q&A chat that says, how do we, this is sort of a big theme that we're hearing a lot, how do we go beyond land acknowledgements? How can institutions honor Indigenous people besides naming the land that they're on? What are some concrete steps to build organic relationships?
I would just briefly respond, Amy. I know that you have some stuff, but I would just say, starting off with something as simple as, like, listening and believing Indigenous peoples, right? And so once you're listening to us, right, as Native people, we're always being accused of that we're long-winded, right? But that's it's our way of being able to tell our stories, right? And everything's cyclical for us, right? So we'll get to the point when we're going to get to the point, right? But what I would say is that listen and believing, right? And stop tokenizing us, right? Stop giving us the opening and the closing when we have so much more to offer. Start including us in the process of developing, the work that you're doing, right? And I would even say, go beyond just sharing space and sharing platforms. I would even say go as far as, like, instead of sharing power, just giving up power, just, like, moving out of the way, right? And because there's so many brown folks, there's so many Indigenous folks that have so much to offer.
Thank you, Chucho. I kind of laughed when Chucho was talking about being long-winded. And it's true. It's true. And especially to listen and believe, because I also feel like sometimes people are hearing us, but they're not really listening and learning. And as far as some of the work around land acknowledgements that I've seen in our community, I think that ASU is a really great example. They have a really strong group of Native students there who have been advocating on behalf of O'odham people, not just O'odham, but O'odham, O'odham, Maricopa, and really working to have an O'odham presence, like Chucho mentioned earlier, is that visibility. Hire Native peoples in these departments to lead them, to create the curriculums, and to create how these events or different things are happening on these campuses, especially because there's such a community of so many different backgrounds, So I really look to them and the good work that they're doing. And for ourselves here in Tucson or in Tucson, I feel like there's still a lot of work to do because, you know, the University of Arizona is built on ancestral remains. There's still a lot of, you know, our people and things that we dig up. But like Chucho said, is giving up that power. And I think that's all a part of like believing, because it goes back to these seeds, you know, they didn't want us to have our seeds back because they didn't think we were going to take care of them. They didn't believe that we were going to do the right thing or had the right resources, but we've had them all along, you know? And it's just funny, I think sometimes, you know, when people are digging up our bones and they're trying to figure out who we are, what we are, and we're still the same people that were here. You know, we still have that knowledge and it's passed down. And sometimes a lot of those answers that you're looking for aren't going to be found in books. They're going to be found, you know, on the line and with the people and in these learning processes. And I think there's a lot that goes into that. I've definitely had experiences with people who want to have conversations about white privilege and about the steps that they can take, but when it actually comes down to taking the steps, they don't want to have that conversation anymore. So I move on. I move on, and I've seen that, you know, maybe they just weren't ready. They weren't ready, but as more people begin to learn and to grow and to evolve, sometimes those people will come around and make those corrections and take those right steps. But maybe they just didn't believe or trust, you know, that good was going to come out of that change. But you know, we've been observing ourselves and learning and you know, we have a lot to share. So yes, going beyond just the land acknowledgement and the you know, email signatures and all of that stuff. It's really important to show up and to show out, you know. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy, so much. And, you know, thank you to both of you. Amy, you reminded me when you spoke to one of our classes, you've been to many of our classes, but last semester, and showed that image of your family, you know, on both sides of what is now a border. And I remember one of the first things that you said when you shared that image was, I want to just say that we're here, you know, we're here, and we're doing work, and we are continuing on the legacy of our people. And it resonates with me now that you're, you know, saying this piece, that Chucho's saying this piece about listening and believing, right? And that we have to really listen and hear and step aside, you know, like you're saying, Chucho, of not just sharing power, but like stepping aside and saying, you know, please, let's build, right? And not saying, can you just be a token hire over here, that we're going to have, you know, some hire a native scholar of some kind, or a consultant. So really appreciate those reminders, and just both of you for being so open, and with a lot of the images that you shared, and a lot of the, you know, the cultural knowledge that you're sharing with us. I also just want to recognize that takes, you know, you're sharing a big part of you and who you're representing. And so that doesn't go unnoticed. So I just want to thank you both so much for taking time with us and sharing all of the images and the stories and the perspectives and the analysis. We hope to continue building relationships with both of you as we move forward. So if you have any last words, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. My students are, by the way, my students are on here, and they're just, they just have been taking a class, and they're just so excited. So I just want to thank you on their behalf too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who was a part of putting this conversation together. I do hope that we continue to have them and to keep showing up. for each other. And just thank you everybody for your time. If anybody wants to know more and learn more or continue to connect, I can leave my information in the chat box. And everyone have a great weekend and celebrate, you know, whose land you're on, coming not Monday, but every day. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Safe travels for the rest of your journey.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate you all.
Thank you very much, Chucho. It's really good to see you and to hear you and to have you here. Really appreciate it.